I've just finished editing the Q&A video which I shot with my coach Ben a couple days ago. We answered all the questions pretty in-depthly and even talked around the points quite a lot, so I'm going to split it up into 2, maybe even 3 parts of about 10 to 12 minutes long. But what I'm going to do in the description down below is put which questions we've answered in each video and also the time at which we've answered each question. If you don't have time to watch the full video and just want to look at the questions and see which ones are interesting to you, you can then go to that time, or if you're looking for your question, it'll be down in the comments below. I'll release the videos probably one a day for the next few days until the Q&A is done. If you want to get in touch with Ben or follow him on social media or check out the coaching company Science of Sport, I'll put all the social media stuff down in the description below. So finally getting around to the Q&A, time to introduce Coach Ben here. Ben is the master behind the program.
I wouldn't say the master, I'd say like part of the team, the performance team.
Definitely bring the knowledge to the table, I think.
It's definitely a partnership. I'd actually say with us it's more of a, I don't know, it's something different. We've got 3 heads of the dragon, so to speak, with Sarah in there as well. So yeah.
Definitely not just 20-minute efforts, like a ton of different stuff. Everything from like torque work, like big gear stuff, to 20-minute stuff, to 10-minute like VO2 stuff, like 2-minute stuff. It's a whole range of stuff.
Yeah, I think you'd get pretty bored just doing sort of 2x20. Oh, yeah. Like you can't really sort of progress that way, and I think from an athlete point of view as well, it's also pretty boring. Like you want to make sure that you're giving the athlete new challenges. So a good way to explain this would be with Ed. Like generally we'll work through sort of different training blocks. Each block will have a specific goal. Usually we start with a strength block where, as the name suggests, we're obviously trying to increase strength on the bike. We generally try and achieve that with some off the bike gym work, but also some what we call torque sessions or strength intervals on the bike. So really big gear, very low cadence, sort of around 35 to 45 RPM, really pushing hard through the pedals to try and generate the most amount of torque we can. And those will start with probably like a 4-minute interval, and then bring in some longer ones as well with 10 minutes, etc. So and then we'll progress on to more basic stuff where it's sort of steady state climbing, then bring in the more sort of intense work, and then obviously high intensity sessions where the intervals are usually lower than 5 minutes or shorter than 5 minutes, and then we just sort of add the numbers up. So you did your first one for this block the other day, 2 days ago, 6 by 4 minutes with 4 minutes recovery. Ultimately it comes down to sort of physiology with trying to provide a stimulus big enough to sort of cause some adaptation. So that means that I can't ask Ed to go and ride for 10 minutes at 488 watts, but you know, we can get him to work at that workload with short intervals. So if I wanted him to do that, then we should shorten the interval, so 4 minutes. But then initially we'll start with sort of equal recovery, just to make sure, just to give you time to recover so that you can hit it again. But then also a way we'll increase the intensity of the session is adjust those sort of rest intervals. So shorten them just to make the stress a little bit harder.
Because you remove, like, even chucking out like 30 seconds worth of rest,
feels like a lifetime.
Changes the whole game. It starts with choosing a goal, because you need a time, you need like a specific time frame where you need to be really strong, and you need to know, hey, I've got 6 months for that. Or like in this case for nationals, it was like, hey dude, I'm kind of thinking of nationals, gonna cut the off season a bit short, can we be on form in like 7 or 8 weeks? And it was like, yeah, why not?
I think the only thing we removed there was probably your like more endurance based thing. So sort of like basic training where Ed would have done a lot of very sort of low intensity rides. We just sort of like took that block out, because like you're just coming from like an off season, so you know, almost like a mid-season break and then go again. So it's not like we had to worry about your endurance capacity, that was always there. But in general it's sort of our model at Science of Sport. We generally try and we use a block periodization sort of model where we divide training into different blocks or phases. We usually start with strength, then we'll move on to like a basic sort of endurance preparation. Then we start to introduce intensity, usually with longer efforts, 20, 10, 60-minute efforts, and then move on to the high intensity stuff later. But each of those blocks focuses on a very small number of variables that we're trying to improve. Obviously, your overall performance improves in each of the blocks, but we're targeting specific things in each block, and they're generally organized in a manner so that the adaptation made in the previous blocks isn't lost when you move to the next one. Yeah. So that's key, obviously. And there was actually an interesting study that came out that looked at sort of doing things the other way around, starting with shorter intervals and then moving into longer ones. And the overall study, like statistically, there weren't differences, I think, between the two groups. But what was interesting is if you looked at it, and again, I think looking at it from a coach or like a practical point of view, is I found that the model that we use, so going from sort of your more basic to more high intensity work, had a higher sort of hit rate in terms of success. So you were more likely to succeed in terms of improving performance if you went that way compared to the other way.
What's up? I think every year. So I started with Ben in 2010. And I don't remember what my FTP was then, but it was pretty low.
I probably got the data somewhere.
End of 2011, we did a 1 hour TT and I was 321. And then from then it was...
Is that the one in the lab? The 40k?
Yeah, it was 321. That was end of 2011.
You dipped under an hour there, just
like, thank God.
That's fine.
So that was 321. The year after, I think I was 335. Then it went up to like a 341 or 342. Then a 351. Then last year, we got it up to like 360 by mid-season, about 370 by the end. Before Rwanda was around 370. And I'm currently around 370, maybe a little bit over. I think the only time we maybe stagnated was 2015. Like that winter, 2014, 2015, because my power meter broke and I just went rogue.
Oh yeah.
I just did these ridiculous endurance rides, and I was like training more than ever, and I was probably my worst ever. And it's then like when I got the power.
I got a big like data dump there. You were like, just look at this and tell me what's happened.
Yeah, because I had no data. So then I was like, dude, this is a disaster, and I sent you everything. Yeah. And then you plotted it on Golden Cheetah using the heart rate.
Yeah, so we use like trims to try and, which is using heart rate data to try and calculate like a TSS, and if I remember correctly, your CTL was like a vertical line. It just went like straight
ridiculous, yeah. So just lesson for everyone, you do not need to ride 1,000 kilometers in 1 week in winter. Like, it's just not necessary, honestly.
Another season was when you were in France, and you just had like your race calendar was completely packed.
Yeah,
and, you got to a point where you were like racing, almost like over racing, to a point that there was no time to actually train. Yeah. And I think it's a trap that a lot of athletes fall into. We see it a lot here. Our race seasons or race calendar can be quite full in South Africa. Like particularly if you do road and mountain bike, you don't sort of struggle to find a race each weekend.
Yeah.
And guys over race, and if they're racing, then sometimes it's difficult for them to train, and a lot of the time the sort of stimulus you can get from training can be a lot higher than that in a race, particularly a road race. If you think about sort of strategy and everything, it can be quite submaximal, where you're just sitting way easy, and then things kick off, and then it's time to respond. But I don't think you get as much of a benefit as you would from doing a quality training session.
Yeah, because so basically the season I moved, that final season in France, I raced less. And then the first season last year, so in the US and Canada, I raced the least ever, but it was definitely these blocks of racing, like it was targeted stage races on like 3 consecutive weekends. And the other time it would be almost like 2 or 3 weeks, maybe even more, with no racing. And those were the biggest jumps in FTP I've ever had. No, not really. I've never had anything offered to me. I've never like seen people doing anything. I've raced against dopers who've come back. I've had, I wouldn't say good friends, but people I know who've been busted. And like, it's still really, I mean, those dudes are really secretive. I mean, you're never gonna really be rolling with them, I think. And I also think I'm really lucky that I came into the sport as it was really cleaning up. And I think my personal opinion is that it is a lot cleaner. I think there's a lot of playing in a grey area now, but I think actual full-on like rocket fuel kind of stuff is done. And I mean, I think like I've seen basic painkiller stuff, and that's probably about it.
Yeah, like I think it's I definitely wouldn't say like the sport is sort of like I wouldn't say it's clean, but like I would agree with you that the sort of in your face stuff is definitely gone. And I think hopefully the new crop of sort of younger guys coming through don't get pulled onto that sort of old school mentality and everything that goes with it.
Yeah, I train alone like all the time. I actually prefer it that way. Training's like my time, and I've always kind of been like that. I have no worries doing a 6-hour ride completely alone, and I'm good at doing intervals alone. My power meter is like my best friend when I'm riding, so I'm not worried about that.
Yeah, I think it's a common thing, like I wouldn't say complaint, but it's a common comment we get when we start with an athlete who's sort of the first time they're working with a coach is, you know, like for a lot of us, like recreational riders, like the reason we get into riding is because, you know, it's something we can do with our mates and something we enjoy and stuff like that, and there is that sort of fear that adding structure takes away from that. Like, I can't do this because I've got to do this session. So generally what I encourage people to do with this sort of issue is say, okay, you can still ride with your mates. Rather, if you've got like a half an hour, 45-minute warm-up, why don't you just roll out with your mates that way, talk some rubbish, catch up and whatever, and then say, listen guys, like I'm just riding to this hill or this area to do my session. Do the session, and then, you know, if they could have a similar plan, they could join you with a session, and then you just, you know, you do your intervals on your own sort of time, cool down, you can catch up again, and then hit the next interval, and then you've always got the cool down sort of ride home as well to chat, and yeah, that's it. I mean, the only real place that sort of it becomes a problem is when on our easier sort of rides and stuff, if it's, and this is particularly for the men out there, turns into a bit of an ego sort of contest where everyone's sort of half wheeling each other, and you know, you hit the climb and all the banter stops and everyone goes quiet because all of a sudden it's like everyone's sitting at 350 watts going up the climb. Well, this is easy. Oh yeah, sure. So I think that's the only real danger, is that those sort of rides with mates and stuff become a little bit too too hard. But apart from that, it's definitely something you can make work. So I don't think, you know, you need to be scared about sort of undergoing a structured program just because you want to ride with your mates. There are ways around it.